Here we were, just kicking our heels back, sitting and waiting for 7:15 to come, which is when we normally come to you to just look back on game number one in a doubleheader and look ahead to the next. But we've been jolted into action because the first game has finished very, very early indeed. Not perhaps as early as Punjab would have wanted. They wanted to finish it off in 10 overs. It just took a little bit longer, 13 overs to be exact, but they'll certainly take it thanks to one man, KL Rahul, 98 of 40 do deliveries. What a genius. If only they could have put this together as a team. Shardul Thakur, outstanding again, 3 for 28 amidst all the carnage, where even Deepak Chahar went at 12 runs and over. 134 was never going to be enough in the context of a match, but it was just about enough to perhaps prevent Punjab mounting a miraculous run chase. Here we are on Cricbuzz Live in association with our fantasy partner, My 11 Circle. It's goodbye to Chennai as far as the league stage is concerned. They'll be back in the playoffs. It's goodbye to Punjab for the entire season. But it's a story of too little, too late. I'm joined by Shaun Pollock, Joy Bhattacharjya. Joy, I'll come to you first because Shaun and I sort of did this whole Punjab run chase to death on Cricbuzz Combox. So we'll try and avoid him repeating everything he said. It was the main theme that we had there was, if only. Where were they early season?
Where were they early season? Where were they when they had to get fourth in the final over and they couldn't get across the line? They have 100 questions to ask themselves, and the players have a lot of questions to ask themselves. But the truth is, so does the coaching staff. Given the way they played today and given the team lineup that they had today, there are certain obvious things that you can look at and say, if, for example, Chris Jordan was fit and finished quarantine, there was no reason for him not to be playing. This is a bowling attack that finally looked like a bowling attack that made sense. Again, I said, we were talking about it just before they went on to bat, that they'll float Sarfraz Khan. They did that. That experiment has failed for the nth time for them. And perhaps there is a time they should also figure out what they want to do. But that's the thing with them, that their opening pair is so very good that if somebody gives them support down the line, that whether it's a Shahrukh or an Aiden Markram or an Hendricks, they are a very formidable combination. And that's something that they haven't got in the entire season. Finally, they've got it going together. And I'm happy for them. But it's just, if you're a Punjab fan, you look back and said, now, it's bittersweet. The victory today is bittersweet. It's, you're happy about winning, but you're like looking at the coach and saying, these guys were available before, weren't they? I mean, you haven't picked them before this.
And there's some serious experience on that bench, Shaun. I mean, when you talk about Anil Kumble, Wasim Jaffer, Andy Flower, these are not just guys who mess around. You've got some serious firepower in there, serious firepower in the dugout. They'll have lots of positives to take from the bowling. Rahul and Mayank have been outstanding, but just something in the middle and some X factor that has prevented them being in the top four.
Yeah, it has indeed. And I mean, you look at the coaching staff and they would have had their ideas and the way to get their team to be successful. Chris Gale would have been part of those plans and maybe didn't kick on like they would have liked him to do. And sometimes when you're in the mix, you can't see the different options that could possibly be available to you or the subtle changes you can make. And I think everyone has to really take responsibility. As you said, I mean, if you think about the starts they've got, the top two, to not have anyone coming in and doing a job for them. And then even some of the bowling performances, they've been good and not being able to get it over the line in those tight situations as well. I mean, they'll be disappointed. I think it's not the first season that they've had a bit of frustration. But gee, KL Rahul's innings, how good was that? I mean, that for me, that's as good as I've seen in this RPL. Not maybe because of the amount of runs, but just the way he struck it, the class of the shots, the elegance, there was plenty of power, but it never just looked like brute force and ignorance power. It just looked like controlled, majestic power, if you want to put it that way. And those 8 sixes, 7 fours, I mean, he's headed top of the hitting fraternity for the tournament. He's now, 80-odd runs ahead on the orange cap. So it's to have one person in your team perform that way, and your team not make the qualification, it does tend to suggest that there's been elements of the team that haven't put their hand up. And you can't get away with them. Guys are getting good contracts and you ask them to do certain jobs, but no one's backed up the captain, unfortunately.
Yeah, Joy, when we look back at someone like KL Rahul, look back several seasons, and you look at the leading run scorer or the leading wicket taker, chances are there's a correlation between that and where their team finishes. If there's not, you know there's a bit of a problem, and that's what's happened here. You're that far ahead, top run scorer, you're the captain, obviously leading from the front. What's happening behind you?
No, absolutely. And once again, let's go back to what we discussed in the pre-show. What did we say in the pre-show? That when KL Rahul looks over his back, he doesn't find the support he has there. So he plays carefully. Today, they had nothing to lose. They had to reach it within 10 overs. So for the first time, KL Rahul played with total freedom. Look what this man can do when he plays free. This is the kind of innings that he can play. 8 sixes, 7 fours, 15 shots to the boundary. Brilliant innings. Absolutely stunning innings. And again, a class above everyone else who was batting today. And that's what I'm saying. Allow this guy to be free. Maybe get in guys in the middle. Maybe they don't score at 140, 150. But can they get 150, 120, 130? Can they get their 30, 40s regularly? And you'll see a very different KL Rahul. You'll see the same KL Rahul maybe get you those same runs at about 140, 145 clip again. That's all he needs. He just needs something at the back.
I'm just trying to figure out, Sean and I discussed this at that point. We had some lovely, great straight drives. We had one over long off. We had a flick over long leg, but that sweep, I know we talked about it on Cricbuzz Combox, but it's worth reliving that one more time. Fast bowler, he swept for 100-meter six.
Incredible. You guys were talking about it, and I was just wondering, where do you see cricket like that? It's also the arrogance of a shot of a player who's in so much form that he can afford to go down like that, because that can be dangerous. To go down to sweep a fast bowler is a dangerous thing at the best of times, and it's not. And fast bowlers hate it because it's like almost assuming that you're not really a fast bowler. You're like a dibbly-doubly bowler that can afford to go down and sweep. So, no, I thought he was absolutely incredible.
It does beg the question, though, what role does he play for India? Obviously he's picked as maybe one of the top three or one of the openers, and I just think he's done really well in those initial overs to get the team onto the front foot. If his role, which it would look like from the outside, is that he wouldn't bat in the top two, he would only come in at 3. It does take away a little bit from what he's been able to achieve, because he picks up the momentum in those first 6 overs. And if he gets to the crease, he manages to get the ball just with beautiful cricket shots through the infield over the top. And then he can cash in once he's set. So, yeah, it's an interesting dilemma that I'm glad I don't have to deal with.
But it's not just us sort of waxing eloquent against this particular side. The numbers, the seasons, the history, it all proves it. Punjab in the past have been stuck on 12 points 4 seasons in a row. Now, we know 12 points is possible qualification. Very unlikely, but possible. But in most cases, 12 points is almost made it, but didn't make it. That's what's happened to Punjab. 5th place at the moment. That's where they're probably likely to finish. Look at that net run rate. They tried hard. They've gone over Mumbai. They really needed to get not over. They couldn't get over, but as close to Kolkata as possible. That if Rajasthan were to absolutely thrash Kolkata in the second game, they would have some chance of getting over. Now it'll need to be some ridiculous thrashing, and we're not expecting that to happen. So 5th place is where they'll probably finish, maybe even 6th place. And every time, Joy, guess who has been the top scorer? KL Rahul.
No, absolutely. He's been miles ahead. And here I have something to say. Internationally, when international teams play, especially in leagues where there is, you can't buy all the top players. Like in football, you can go and buy all the top players and just bulk up. But in leagues like the NBA or baseball, what happens is, if you have a limited budget, if you realize that the team has a low ceiling, then you try and break up the team and you try again from scratch. I think that's what Punjab needs. They need a reboot, because this is the same team which is every year they're going there, and for 4 years they played with the same team, and they keep coming up to that level, 18, 19, 20, 21, and they're just not getting across the line. And I think that's the one thing that they have to look at and say, we cannot afford to do 18, 19, 20, 21 again. Because they've done it too often. They've just got those 6 points. They're close, but they're not finishing. It's better to break it up and say, we might have 3 wins, we might have 10. But we are certainly not going to sit in what we call mid-table mediocrity again. I think that's what they need to do.
And that table, Sean, the playoff drought that we showed you, what it didn't tell you was for a lot of the teams, a drought meant you could finish 8th, you could finish 7th, you had a bad season, you forget about it. But in Punjab's case, it was never really a bottom of the table kind of scenario. It was always, we're just there, but we're not there.
Yeah, funny enough, looking at that points table is the one that sums it up for me. Because if you do have a look at the points table, you can just see, look on the right-hand side, NRR, just short of being a positive season. And that's been the case in point for them. They're 0.0001 of being in the positive net run rate, and they're just one win away from it being a positive season. And that's been the case in point for them too often. So, yeah, it's a difficult one to try and work out. And for me, it's just been a case of the middle order, the finisher. There hasn't been enough of that because they have got starts. And to their credit, I mean, if they had Maxwell and he had performed like he has this season, they would have definitely been into the playoffs. And they made that decision to go down the route of Maxwell because that's what they were requiring. They had the starts. They just needed someone to really fire. But when he came across, he didn't manage to do so. So I would be dead keen to hang on to 5 or 6 players that they have got. Some guys who've really contributed well. But the makeup of the rest of the side will have to be pinpoint in their selection to make sure that they get those extra points required.
Yeah, we talked about it yesterday. We felt that KL Rahul is someone you're not going to let go unless for some reason he feels that he wants a completely different change of setup. But for now, we'll assume that obviously Rahul is the one who's going to be the standout for them. And I remember, Joy, we had this conversation probably on the day off or just after that 8 runs of 2 overs and 4 runs of 1 over, the Kartik Tyagi game and the Mustafizur game. Let's not keep calling it the Kartik Tyagi game. If Fizz hadn't conceded 4 in that 19th over, Tyagi wouldn't have been able to even do what he did. So in that particular game, we said, are Punjab going to look back at this one and say, that was 2 guaranteed points? Is it going to affect them? It has.
No, it absolutely has. It absolutely has. You look at that, and those they look back through the season, there's so many. There's more than one game. That's the closest, perhaps. But there are a couple more games like that, which they should have easily got across the line. And they'll ask themselves, I think more than anything else, I don't think there's anything left to ask. I think they'll just have to turn around and say, what is the core we are building with? Definitely, there's some lovely building blocks out there. Let's have a look at the building blocks you have. You have Rahul, you have Mayank Agarwal. You'd have to hold on to them for life if you can. Then after that, you turn down and you say, there's Ravi Bishnoi, definitely who's somebody there who's giving you value. So those 3, if you say these give me value, then you look at, say, somebody like a Shami, Arshdeep. Maybe you go and right to match with those kind of guys. You don't buy them out, this thing, but you just use them and right to match. After that, the disappointment, if you see, is actually Chris Jordan just come on for 1 game, so it's difficult to comment on him. The disappointment really has been their international contingent. Whether or not, they have just not given them anything. They've just not got anything from any of their international contingent. And Enriques and this thing, it's too short to judge Enriques or Jordan, but none of the others, unfortunately, have given them anything this season.
Well, let's quickly update you. This is a discussion, of course, that will not only carry on between us. It's going to happen in the Punjab dugout. It's going to happen in, as far as Punjab the fans are concerned. Quick update. Kolkata are probably not going to do their preferred option in a crucial game. That's the one coming up. Match number 54 from Sharjah. They've lost the toss, and Owen Morgan and company are going to have to set a score in a must-win game. First reaction, Sean, not their preferred suit, but for a stronger side, you've got to do that if you want to qualify.
Yeah, 100%. You have to face all situations. You have to be ready for any adversities and anything that you can do in order to get over the line. But they've loved chasing. They've done well. And this time they're going to have to. The key for me will be assess that surface. It hasn't been a great surface for quite a few games now. And you have to work out what's going to be a winning score. The last thing you want to do is get desperate and try and post 160 or 170 and get bowled out for 80. And then it's game over and your net run rate will take a crash as well. So it's going to require a lot of the minds in that camp to get together, think clearly, and assess and come up with exactly the right score, and then produce the ability to get to that score. I think it's going to be key. So not in favor of what they would like to do, but at this stage of the tournament, you don't get to ask for favors and get things to go exactly according to plan. You have to make the most of the situation.
Yeah, certainly has. There's going to be, of course, team changes we're going to talk about. Rajasthan are basically going to throw everybody in and have a bit of, not fun, but they're going to try and maybe pick on a few players who haven't played for a while. But Joy, let's just talk about the Kolkata change. And of course, we will see the squad shortly. Lockie Ferguson, first and foremost, in for Saudi. That should be good news for them.
That's good news. That's definitely good news. You know, you have a 150 plus bowler in form, 150 plus bowler who's what you call an intimidator up front. You're definitely going to. I think Kolkata has now got comfort with their playing 11 because, you know, Shubman, Venkatesh Tripathi, then Rana comes in, Owen Morgan, but importantly, Shakib, who can float and gives them that balance out there in the middle. Sunil Narayan comes in. So I think this is as good an 11 as Kolkata can put out. Of course, Andre Russell is a different proposition altogether, but Andre Russell is not here. And let me tell you one thing. Kolkata might not have won the toss today, but they have one thing in their favor, which they've certainly got, which is both this game and the next eliminator will be played at Sharjah. And I believe, forget the batting, I think Kolkata's bowling is best equipped to take advantage of Sharjah conditions. I believe they have the kind of bowling which really works in conditions like Sharjah. So I think that's one card that they've been dealt with, which they can take good advantage of. And the other thing is that no matter, I know that Kolkata doesn't prefers chasing to setting targets, but an immature, not very experienced Rajasthan batting lineup trying to chase any total which is par or just above par, they will struggle, I have to tell you.
Well, that is the other side of the coin. And it could also be, Joy, that an inexperienced but fearless Rajasthan batting lineup could have just put a few more runs on the board and made Kolkata uncomfortable. So maybe blessing in disguise, they'll say, listen, we've lost the toss. We don't have a say in it. Let's go with what we have. The inexperienced lineup, why we are talking about all the changes, let's have a look, Shaun, at the Rajasthan lineup. There have been plenty of changes, a very unfamiliar look-up. 4 changes to be exact. Anuj Rawat comes in, Jaydev Unadkat comes back, Chris Morris, who played early on, he comes back into the squad, and at the very top, they have got Liam Livingston, and he's taking the place of Evan Lewis. I can only imagine that maybe a niggle, or it may just be a tactical change from Rajasthan. Shaun?
Yeah, it's just on an easy ground though. That's the key for me. You know, if you come in this tournament and you're coming off some good form and you've played well, and you get to the Sharjah ground, you can sort of adapt your game and absorb a bit of pressure and then reapply. But when you've been out of the team and you know you haven't had much of a hit, you're not coming with confidence. You walk to the middle there, and it will seem like a strange place to be. You know, that their best batting performance, they haven't produced great cricket in the last 4 games, except for that brilliant batting performance, which was in Abu Dhabi on a wicket where the ball was sliding on nicely. A little bit of dew made it easy to hit through the line. And that's when they were at their best. And that's why the inexperience is often the thing that makes teams be found out and come up short, because the inexperience doesn't know how to adapt like the mature, experienced players do, and how to adjust their game plan and come up with a different plan on how to be effective. So we'll have to see how they go. Morris back into the mix. In the Kolkata side, Lockie Ferguson, the only thing I'm a little bit worried about, I think Saudi could be actually better suited on that surface, because I think pace on that kind of surface, if it's not as accurate as it should be, can sometimes be easy to put away. And Tim Saudi's so accurate, isn't he? I mean, he gives you absolutely nothing. So not surprised, because Lockie Ferguson's done brilliantly for them and he's been a bit of X factor. But I'm going to be interested to see if that extra pace actually works against them or for them. I think at the back end he'll be perfect because he's done well there. But just at initial overs up front.
Yeah, that could be critical. I know, Joy, your first reaction was, and I'm sure Kolkata fans as well will be reacting, saying, yes, Lockie's been so effective. But if you just stop for a moment, maybe Shaun has a point, but I think it's a hard call that they would have had to have made.
Yeah, it's a hard call. It's a hard call. It's a difficult call. Yes, these conditions, if you look at it, I was looking at the Rajasthan squad as well and looking at Jaydev Unadkat. And Unadkat has this thing where he bowls these cutters which are short of length. They just sit up and just with this kind of pitch where the bounce is slightly variable and it's slow, ball will not come on. So he enjoys bowling. Somebody like, he basically, there's a term for it that they use. It's called Katori ball. It's Katori is like a container. So they're very difficult to hit. So Jaydev Unadkat on sticky pitches is a difficult proposition to hit, and he's a clever bowler. So if he can take advantage of this condition, it probably suits him more than it suits a faster bowler or a more accurate bowler in that sense, because the ball coming on is not what perhaps is the best. It's not going to happen in Sharjah, and the faster bowlers generally tend to go. I mean, Sheldon Cottrell will remember that too for many years. It possibly cost him an IPL career for the next couple of years after that. But that's the thing, that difficult, not the easiest of pitches. The only one that I'm also interested in saying is Chris Morris. I mean, what is the message they're sending him? Are they telling him, okay, boss, you are our 16, you are our most expensive player. We need you to come in and do it. I mean, what are they telling him when he walks onto the ground is what I'm interested in. Because as Shaun has been saying for the last few days, he hasn't really looked the bowler he can be when he's in form.
Yeah, that's a point over there. Shaun, we talked about it. I think you were giving us a technical analysis of Morris falling away, and I'm sure he's conscious of it himself. It's not that he's experienced enough. So he would have had enough time out of the game to say, look, if I'm coming back, no matter what the state of the tournament is, I too need to show my wares. I've gone for a few bucks. The big auction's coming up.
Yeah, and I mean, he could be quite effective. The last match, we saw how the ball banged in back of length, like 7 or 8 meters, ended up staying low and going through. But I think that was a pitch that was being used for the second time. So we'll have to see how he goes today. But I mean, the issue with the technical side is that I've watched him over the years for South Africa, and it's not like a one-off. It's a common denominator that I've noticed in his game, with regards to the right-handers in particular, getting it to slides too straight. I think the key, though, is that he does give them a little bit more depth as well, batting-wise, just a bit of strike ability at the bottom when it could be difficult. And that's probably the reason why they've turned back to him. But yeah, he will be disappointed with the way it's gone as of late in particular. He was pretty good in the India leg of the RPL. And if he's looking to state a claim in the auction, you need to keep reminding people of what you're capable of.
Certainly do. And they seemed a very happy bunch in the pre-match huddle they had. They were all smiles, few high fives in there. From the body language, you couldn't tell it's a team who were possibly playing their last game of the tournament. But again, them, like Punjab, have that bizarre mathematical little issue that they can settle.
Yeah, and look, this again, if you look at the only other team that is consistently not made it in the playoffs other than Punjab, it's been Rajasthan. These are the two teams who have consistently missed out. And, missing out before the 2018 auction was a question that, in those days, Punjab and Rajasthan would spend $2-3 million or $5 million less than the other teams. But post that 2018 new media rights, all the teams have open purses. Everyone is spending the same amount of money. So today, how much Rajasthan and Punjab are spending on team? They're spending as much money on buying players as is a Mumbai or a Delhi. So those excuses that, we are the Moneyball team and we make do with less money, that's out of the table now. That's out. So now they need to look at those top players and said, either we're not getting value from our top players or we are not using them properly. They need to look back and say, why have we not made it 4 years in a row? And they also need to seriously introspect.
I think in honesty, though, their big spenders have been, Stokes, Butler, and Archer. And unfortunately, they haven't come back. Another guy who's under a bit of pressure is Liam Livingstone. I mean, he came into the second leg after that 100 performance in England, and everyone was, even he was hot property. He was everyone's on the tip of their tongue, and they're all discussing him and what he could or couldn't do. And he hasn't fired at all. So it's another one opportunity, this time at the top of the order, which he'll probably prefer. So also interesting to see what he can do, because he is one of those guys, if he does get going, it could be a one-off innings that would really create a bit of a stir and set him up nasty for the next auction.
It certainly will be, but let's not rule out Rajasthan's chances as well. I think maybe quickly look at the points table one more time here in context of Rajasthan. We've shown it for Punjab with that 0.001 that Shaun commented on. We've seen it in context of where the top three teams are. Rajasthan, very, very low net run rate. So obviously they can get to 12 points from here, but a huge victory against Kolkata will mean that Kolkata's net run rates stays positive. They'll probably have to chase it, we are being told, in 9 overs, depending on, of course, what Kolkata put on. And then, of course, hope that Mumbai end up losing that last match to Hyderabad. And So they're still alive. They're still alive. It's still in their hands, in a sense, with this particular match as far as it's concerned. But again, like with Punjab, a long shot. They've got some new players they've thrown in there. We've just another reminder to all of you that with all those changes, unlike the previous game, we just had one change. My 11 Circle team becomes a little bit more challenging to pick for newcomers. If you're coming in for the first time, 1 crore, the first prize, download the app, select a match, create your own personal team with a skipper, and then see if you can beat the experts, beat your friends, beat everything that is thrown your way. It's going to be very competitive indeed. We'll help you, as we always do, with our My 11 Circle smart picks. And here we are with the 3 players that we think could be the possible picks. We were thinking of going with an Evan Lewis, but since Rajasthan haven't picked him, we won't pick him. Yashasvi Jaiswal, first up. Joy, another young player. This tournament is all about young players shining, and he's certainly shown enough, not just for the auction, but for knocking on that Indian team door.
Yeah, I think there's this thing they say called breakout innings. What was your breakout performance? They say it in film that, this was so-and-so's breakthrough performance, breakout performance. I think that 50 that he got off 19-20 odd balls, that was a breakout performance. He suddenly has the confidence. Before that, he's been getting 20s and 30s and not converting them. That 50 would have given him a lot of confidence. I think he now looks at himself and says, I can perform in the top leagues. I can perform at this level. Now, he may not be able to do it consistently, but I think his confidence will take him a while. And I think he's going to be a player to watch in the auction as well. So I definitely. And again, at least one thing about Yashasvi Jaiswal, he's going to get a chance to bat, which is important in this format.
Opening the batting and knowing it kind of suits his game, Shaun, because whatever Kolkata put on, of course, obviously Kolkata are focusing on trying to consolidate that spot, but both teams are in a sense in a similar position. They both need to do something. Rajasthan just need to do it much better.
Yeah, they do. And I think his role definition with the two, if Livingston is going to open the batting with him, might be a left-hander just to get in there and sort of create a bit of a platform for the others to fire from. So you might get a consistent performance from him. He's got the fireworks. We've seen it. He's got some beautiful shots. And normally they're just cricketing shots. They don't have to be too risky. And then he might allow Livingston to take the big risks. So as a banker, someone who's probably going to get you a bit of a score and earn you quite a few points, I think it's a good call.
Yeah, certainly is. And we have not 1, but 3 My 11 Circle smart picks for you. So who's going to be number 2 with all the changes that we've seen there? And again, someone who's been a relative newcomer to the setup in terms of being on the bench, but not being able to play. Not a newcomer to world cricket. Definitely one of the top all-rounders in the world. Was number 1 all-rounder for the longest time. Shakib Al Hasan is now coming with lots of influence on that previous game. Obviously not much with the bat, Joy, but his 4 overs when they're defending whatever they're defending, and they haven't defended well this season, are going to be crucial.
His 4 overs, see, that's the point. That if you have 2 mystery bowlers, like Sunil Narayan is still a mystery bowler, as is Varun Chakravarti, they'll have to collar somebody. They'll have to go after somebody. And Shakib is best when players are trying to hit him. In these formats, he's best when people are really trying to attack him because he's very clever. He sees the ball very late, and because his action is slightly round arm, that ball that he fires past, which may be a wide, which you fire past to get that stumping, he's like absolutely brilliant at that. So I think that's the thing that with Shakib, he's a very clever bowler. And if there's the team under pressure in terms of run rate or whatever, he's going to take advantage of it. So Shakib he may be expensive, but he's likely to get you wickets because people are going to try and collar him. And remember, he might just bat. Kolkata might just float, depending on what the situation is. They might just say, let's send in Shakib for a bit, because notice Dinesh Karthik doesn't like to come in before the 14th, 15th over. So they might just float Shakib earlier.
Well, there's 2 reasons for that. One is, of course, for urgency of runs. 2 is the lack of form of a certain Captain Morgan, Shaun. That's the call they'll need to take. They're setting runs today. There's no question of, okay, we've got 20 runs to get. Let Morgan go out and have a bit of a hit. There's no question of having a hit. They need as many runs as possible on the board. Yeah,
both left-handers as well. Sometimes you want to send someone out there as a left-handed role, whereas he can do that job in place of Morgan. What does he bat? He bats 3 for Bangladesh, doesn't he? I think in the World Cup, didn't he get 200s? So, I mean, he's no mug. And as you say, rated number 1 in the world for most of his career. I think he's, coming at 7 or 8, that's a massive luxury for Kolkata, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him thrown up a little bit earlier. And sometimes you need to go to the coach and say, "Coach, I'll go play with the freedom. I'll really go and give it a go." And then there's your chance. You get some runs, and you can cement a different spot for yourself in the order.
We just hope, Joy, that he is that kind of character. If anything, as a player, you've never doubted him, but occasionally maybe a few people might have pointed fingers saying he can be a little aloof at times. We just hope it's the other side of Shakib, the more gregarious side, the kind who, as Shaun said, would walk up to Baz McCullum and say, "Baz, I'm the man for you."
No, Shakib is look, he's gone through a lot of stuff in the last 5-10 years. And if you look at it, one of the reasons is that, we look at our, Sachin Tendulkar as a god in India. But it is very difficult for even Indians to understand exactly how much of a hero Shakib is in Bangladesh. Because, even Sachin Tendulkar at his pomp had, there was Saurav Ganguly, there was Rahul Dravid, there were other heroes in and around. Shakib was almost, for the last 10-12 years, he's really been their biggest star. So very difficult for him to get everything together. So he's had a couple of incidents. But Shakib, in the time that I have seen him in the Knight Riders, was a gregarious person, was somebody who was not scared to go up to the coach. He was somebody who would accept his role if he was benched, but he was not scared to go up and said, "Coach, I can contribute, I can give you something." And he's a very, very, very confident person, very confident of his abilities, and always backs himself.
Yeah, and certainly that's what we'd want with... they're going to be batting first, so that's why we're talking a little bit more about Shakib Al Hasan, the batsman, and his bowling, of course, will come later. So we've mentioned 2 players. Let's talk about our third smart pick, and that is Sunil Narayan. Again, talk about mystery bowler, Shaun, talk about changed action, despite everything that he's been through in that sense, a few injuries where he's had to sit out. The new action, whatever it is, still makes him slightly mysterious because no one's quite figured out what the ball is doing when he holds it behind him and the fingers do a few tricks.
Yeah, and you have to also analyze the length. He's a kind of bowler who I would say is more similar to a Rashid Khan with regards to, it comes out as a flat delivery, it pitches back of a length, and he's looking to target the bails sort of length rather than giving it some air. And what we've seen over the years here at Sharjah is anyone who loops it up, those are the guys you can get down to and whack out the ground. It's the ones that are pretty flat, bowl a really good length and hit the top of the bails that are effective. And that's what his basically stock delivery is. So I'm expecting to see him be really effective here tonight. And as we mentioned before on these programs, he's grown in confidence. He's starting to believe more. Worked out his variations and when to time the certain deliveries. So I think he should be pretty comfortable especially if it's a similar surface to what we've seen at Sharjah.
Yeah, Joy, you mentioned even before the first game had started that triumvirate of Shakib, Varun Chakravarti and Sunil Narayan will be absolutely vital. More ideal if they had been bowling first and trying to sort of keep Rajasthan down. But in this case, whatever they have behind them, whether Kolkata get 140 or whether they get 180, they'll have to come to the party as a unit.
Yeah, in fact, one of the things that we were talking about, that if you see the bowling of Sunil Narayan, he was called in that 2014 Champions League. That was when he was called, and then the action went out. 15, 16, 17. Now, if you see his bowling analysis, it started rising. His economy rates and all have started going down, and his strike rate has started rising only in the last couple of years. So there are two things. One is that he's more comfortable with his action, and he's constantly working on it. He'll never show it, but he's constantly working on a new ball, new action. The second is, with Varun Chakravarti bowling well at the other end, they have to take more chances with Shakib. There was a time when if Varun Chakravarti was not there, they'd say, 4 overs of Shakib, okay, we'll knock it around for 24, 25 runs, we'll take our singles, 1 or 2 fours, and we'll get on. Now they can't do that because they say, are we going to knock around 4 overs of Shakib, then 4 overs of Narayan, and then again 4 overs of Chakravarti? So if they can't read Chakravarti as well, that means they have to take some chances with Sunil Narayan, which they were not taking before, which is why he's getting more wickets as well. So it's partially his actions better, but partially their batsmen are being forced to take more risks against him.
Yes, of course. And a reminder that Lockie Ferguson is back in the lineup. Whether or not the surface is absolutely up his street or not, we know that when you're coming at a certain pace, you will have some sort of influence up there in the order for a side, maybe short on confidence. But Shaun, let's come to your favorite part of the show, and that's everyone's talking point right now, scenarios.com. We sort of talked about it briefly, team by team, but right now, right here for both teams, there's some sort of importance here. Let's first put up the points table once again. Shaun, let me throw this one at you. Kolkata, if whatever they score gets chased down with approximately 11 overs to spare, sounds bizarre, but it can happen, then Kolkata's net run rate falls below that of Mumbai. Then Mumbai can afford to lose by a narrow margin and still qualify. So all sorts of things, possibilities arise there.
Yeah, they are. And I think the Kolkata part is the Kolkata is the part where you want to be, because they're in control of their own destiny. They don't have to. The only scenario is very simple: win the game, and there's a good chance that you're going through. The scenarios.com comes in for the other three teams, where they're thinking, how can scenarios possibly work out, so we can squeak in over the line? And they're the ones who're spending time on their pens and papers and calculators and trying to assess the possibilities that could be in the scenarios that might work out for them. So this is the big game of the day, isn't it? I mean, this is the one, because this could determine who gets that fourth spot and basically make the rest of the games null and void.
Yeah, it was the obvious reaction to the previous game when Mumbai absolutely decimated Rajasthan. And 10 seconds after the game, they went up to them and said, guys, good luck for the next one. We're your biggest fans.
Exactly. That's what the irony of that is. What I was thinking about. That it's this tournament makes you schizophrenic. One day you're just smashing this opposition. Next minute you're turning around and saying, guys, play well. We're all depending on you. We're going to cheer every shot you hit. So yeah, it is a completely schizophrenic turn of events. But that's what every Mumbai player would be watching this game today. Every Mumbai fan will be watching this game today and lustily cheering for Rajasthan.
And Joy, let me just add one thing to it. Kumar Sangakkara, Mahela Jayawardene, they've played a lot of cricket together. Keep a lookout in that dugout. I know it's not possible, but if Mahela could possibly be in there, he'd be sitting there with his mate.
Absolutely. He'd be doing whatever he can. But that's the thing, it's so when Mumbai lost a couple of matches, they just, taking their destiny away from their own hands. I know exactly how it feels. I've seen Kolkata in a couple of years where you're depending on other team results and somebody goes and smashes. I remember Dhoni in 2010 went and smashed 4 sixes in Dharamshala and the game was over. I mean, till then you're sitting out there and saying, okay, playoffs, should I start booking tickets? The next thing, Dhoni's hit 4 sixes. You're booking tickets for people to go back to their countries. So yeah, it is one of those things.
Shaun, the other factor is, and this is something you brought up early on, because this match is being played in Sharjah. So one thing, of course, point number one is to go and win the match. But point number two, Kolkata are not going to be getting into that 1 and 2. They're going to be qualifying if they win this match as third or fourth. So they're going to also have to keep an eye on becoming the kings of this pitch. Number one, for the playoff, the eliminator. Number two, for today's game. In a set score kind of pitch, you're not talking set 190. How much are they looking at setting here?
Yeah, if you're asking me, are we looking ready to prediction time? I mean,
we can do both together. I'm asking you the question from an expert point of view and throw in your prediction at the end of that.
Yeah, they have to win 3 games on the surface if they're going to make the final. So, it is a valid point that they have to become the sheikhs of Sharjah over the next 3 matches. I think, prediction-wise, sure. I think it's a new surface. I'm going 159. If they get 159, I think that's good enough to send them into the qualification.
Yep, they would be delighted with that prediction. They'd take it, they'd grab it with both hands and say, here we go, 159. Thank you. Let's stop the count. Let's come into bowl right now. There's something, Joy, in when you play cricket on the controller, PlayStations, etc. You can actually auto play an innings. So if you don't have the time and you want to save time, you press autoplay and the whole innings get auto-generated. So they take 159 auto-generated.
They'll take 159 like in a shot. They'll say 159 with our bowling attack. We'll take it any day of the week. They'll take 159. I think they'll get. I think they'll get more because I think at some point Morgan has to get going, and I think Dinesh Karthik still has a few tricks in his bag. I'm going 170.
170.
Yo.
Now that I can tell you, there's no bias involved there. There's a little optimism, and it's got to do with something or the other happening out there. I'm not going that high. I know we're from the same part of the world, Joy, but I'm just going to be a little more realistic. But still, I feel it'll be a good enough score for them to defend. I'm going an even 150. An even 150 for them to put that on the board and then get Rajasthan 129 for 8. But that's not part of the prediction. That's all we think we are going to have from here. Well, it's been a lengthy old show, an early finish to the first game, lots of conversation, lots of chatter, the kind of extra you can expect if you happen to be subscribed to Cricbuzz Plus. You ask for a little, you get a lot more. That's what we're all about here. Thank you, Shaun. Thank you, Joy. We will, of course, be back on Cricbuzz Combox in the 10th over and see you all at the end of a long midweek doubleheader. That's all from Cricbuzz Live in association with our fantasy partner, My 11 Circle.